Okay, bom dia. Okay, we continue today. Yesterday we started with the Solvency II background, and today we're going to see more about the so-called standard formula. And as we said yesterday, standard formula is not just one formula, but it's a collection of methodologies and techniques. So we are going to see a lot of that, and also I want to show you some systems and applications, but we have a little technical problem with we need to get an adapter, and I think our friends are going to take care of that so that we can show the system and some examples also in Excel. Because now what we are doing is that the presentations are in another computer, and this is where I have some exercises that I want to show you. Okay, so we will start. Well, first of all, there was a little error yesterday, and one of you noticed it about the deferred acquisition expenses in the premium allocation method. That I forgot to put it in I forgot to deduct it from the cash and cash equivalents. I forgot about that. So I made this correction. It's a minor thing, and I'm happy. I don't know who told me about this thing. Yes, yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. And what I did, remember that we have 450. I changed that to 500 to make it clear. And also I put another slide, which is the article that says that the deferred acquisition expenses for this type of contracts can be expensed immediately, so they don't appear in the cash flows, okay? They will appear, of course, in the balance sheet, so I made the adjustment in the balance sheet. So we are going to see that. Yeah, so it was here, right? So here, before we have 450 here, okay? I changed it to 500 simply because to make it clear, because I have another 450 here, and this 450 is a different thing. This 450 is the risk adjustment, okay? So in order to be a better explanation, I put 500 instead of 450. And now here's the change, okay? The change is that in the cash and cash equivalents, so this is the balance sheet, I forgot to put that, to include that. So what I said is that now, instead of having 15,000, and then again, let's look at the exercise. So the premium is 15,000, okay? So we are in the premium allocation approach. This is a contract that has 9-month duration, and let's talk about it again. So it starts this contract starts on the 1st of July, okay? And then has 6 months of life in 2019, and then 3 months of life in 2020, okay? So the contract expires in 31st of March 2020. Total 9 months. Out of these 9 months, 2/3 or 66.6% is in year 2019, and 1/3 is in year 2020, okay? So what we do is that, yesterday we were talking about the claims. The claims were incurred, but now we don't do any projection. Simply, we are at the end of the first reporting period, which is 31st of December, and how much of the premium we allocate to that. Remember, premium, we have to think, we have to change our mentality about premium. Like I said, it will be used forever, because premium is everything, right? We pay commissions based on premium. We do statistics based on premium. We do planning based on premium, and the actuary calculates the premium. Okay, so this is this is the premium is the inflow that we are going to get from the policy holders. So the premium is still there. It's not going to show anywhere in the financial statements. It will be perhaps in the notes. Certainly it will be somewhere there in the cash flows, but then in the income statement or the statement of profit and loss, no premium. Forget about premium. Now, the thing is that if we get 15,000, what we do immediately is that we think of this 15,000 in the old world as a premium for statistics, for everything. And in the new world, we think 15,000 is a liability. So this is our liability. So this 15,000 has to be distributed in two parts. 10,000 in 2019, 5,000 in 2020, okay? So, and then we say, all right, we expect, we observed 7,500 in the second half of 2019, and then we observed 5,000 in claims during the first half of 2020, okay? And we have the corresponding risk adjustments there, okay? And now it's just that 3 months after the contract has expired, we have this settlement, and we are settling all claims, okay? So here is I put the clarification here so that we understand what's going on. 14,500 is the premium minus what? Minus the commission, all right? Or how I call it here, acquisition expenses, okay? Acquisition expenses, okay? Because this is a balance sheet, here I have cash, and the cash is basically the premium that I received, and then the minus the acquisition expenses. And if we want to say commissions, that's okay. Normally, in accountants use the word acquisition. To acquire means to acquire business, to sell business. So acquisition expense is an expense related to selling the business. Typically a commission, but not only. I can have other types of acquisition expenses as well. Okay, but if we have set commissions, that's okay. So this is part of my cash. Okay, so I received for 15,000. I deduct 500 that I paid. And this is the cash at the end of the year, right? And then in the next reporting period, the cash account has not changed, okay? And then at the end, when we settle everything, we have basically the difference here on the bottom says 1,100 is the excess of premiums over claims, right? That's what it is. Okay. So and then I put this note here. The acquisition expenses are not included in the liability for remaining coverage because the entity expends them when incurred, following Article 59A. All right. So they allow me to do that, to expense everything. So what does it mean to expense something? It's when I incur the cost, I pay it. All right. So there's nothing flows to the profit and loss. So here, and I'll show you the text of 59A in a second. Here stays the same, right? Stays the same. We don't basically here we don't put 14,500. But we put 15,000, right? So where is the 500 in commissions here to be found? Well, nowhere, because I expense them, right? So this table is identical, doesn't change. The only change was that I forgot to deduct it in the balance sheet from the cash, all right? And then I show you the paragraph that allows me to do what I did. An entity may choose to recognize any insurance acquisition expenses when it incurs those costs, provided that the coverage period of each contract in the group at initial recognition is no more than 1 year, which is a little redundant because we know that a contract to be measured with a PAA has to be of duration of 12 months or less. Okay, but I think this is true for in general for any contract. If I also have a contract of different duration, or said it differently, if I apply the general measurement model to this type of contract, also I am allowed to expense the acquisition costs. Okay, and thank you. I forgot your name. Sorry. Alex? Alan. Thank you, Alan, for this clarification. Then there was another one about somebody asked me, I cannot see him, about the cat risk in health. Who was that? I think he's not here now, but there's under the solvency. Well, I'll tell you about that when we go to the Solvency II, which is now, right? So this is. Okay, I think we saw this yesterday, and then here, okay, health can be treated as life business or as non-life business. Okay, and then health is very broad. There are many different health products. Could be cash, hospital cash benefits, could be an indemnity benefit, could be a disability benefit, could be medical expenses. There's a wide variety of products, and yesterday we said that health resembles, from the technical standpoint, more of a general insurance product, but not necessarily that's always the case, because, for example, for disability, we have long-term type contracts. So here, either I have two health group of sub-modules, SLT health or non-SLT health. And what is SLT? SLT means similar to life techniques or non-similar to life techniques. Okay, and what is the similarity with life techniques? Basically, the idea of long-term mathematics. Okay, now at the Society of Actuaries, as you know, since a few years, we are doing also general insurance. Society of Actuaries was traditionally life and pensions and group benefits and all the rest, but since a few years ago, there's a general insurance tract, and in the recent examination modifications that we have, the syllabus is frequently updated, and in the recent the most recent changes to the syllabus. We used to have exam C, and exam C was construction and evaluation of actuarial models. And then we have an exam called exam ML, what? ML something. We had a life insurance exam, life insurance mathematics exam, and then exam C. And now we have an exam that is called STAM, short-term actuarial mathematics, and LTAM, long-term actuarial mathematics. So long-term actuarial mathematics is typically mathematics for life insurance. Of course, you can say that we can have life insurance policies that are, for example, group policies are normally 1 year, right? But anyway, the idea is that long-term insurance mathematics is for the long-term type products, whereas short-term actuarial mathematics is for the typically for the general insurance products. Okay, so health can be treated. It depends the situation where we are at. And yesterday I said without being very careful that there was no CAT module in health, but I was wrong. There is a CAT module, and actually this CAT module has 3 components. One is the massive accident. Okay, so I can have a massive accident, and then many policyholders can have an impact, can claim. The second one is called concentration, right? So when there's certain type of not an event, but some type of sickness that has wide implications for many people. And the third one is pandemic. Now, the difference between the second and the third is that pandemic, everybody's exposed to a pandemic. So pandemic is even worse than an epidemic. Epidemic is, well, you have heard of the flu epidemic and things like that, Ebola, if you go to Africa, etc. Pandemic is the same as epidemic, but pandemic means even more people affected. I think the word, the prefix pan, I don't know, it's like, it comes from Greek, we say things like Pan-American, which is to cover everything in America, Pan-European, pandemic. I think this is the thing. So this is just to say that the CAT risk is also present in health, in the health model. So we have CAT for health, we have CAT for non-life, and CAT for life. Okay, and what's in the main difference in life is that life. A catastrophic event in life is 3 or more deaths in one event, which could be a car crash, etc. So this is already a catastrophic event. Whereas in non-life, we usually speak about very large claims out of natural causes, like storms and earthquakes and things like that, or man-made, like I don't know, big explosions, etc. Okay, so this is where we ended yesterday, and now let's talk about number. Oh, something's No, no. This is no. We need 9. No, one before that. This is 9 or 10. No, one before that. We need quantitative aspects. No. Maybe I didn't give it. Dash. Yeah, this one. Okay. Quantitative aspects of Solvency II. So here, okay, we are going to talk about a lot of formulas and a lot of things, and presumably later in the day I will be able to do the projection from my computer, because I have it's not only Excel sheets, because Excel sheets I could hand them over, but it's that I am working with these Excel sheets live. Right, and also I have a R code, and I'm running programs live so that you see the results. No, so I need to physically be handling the computer, and once we fix the thing with the cable or the adapter, then we're going to show these examples that we do. There was also one very interesting reflection from. One of you, and that was basically where's the right, like where's should I start doing solvency and then IFRS 17, or the other way around? You are being given IFRS 17 and you have basically you have no option. You need to comply, and it's the person I was speaking with referred to that as a dangerous path, right? In Europe, like I said, companies have been doing Solvency II for many, many years, and at least the concept of cash flows is not as new as in other markets, right? So we have an added complexity with being exposed to relatively new solvency rules, and also having to comply with IFRS 17. Okay, so here's again the standard formula, and like I said, this is repetition. This is the way the modules, risk modules, are classified, and then we have six risk modules. And then we have soft modules. And then on top of that, we have adjustments, and then we have operational risk, okay? Now, for each module and sub-module, so each of these boxes is a module or a soft module, but each of these soft modules has also sub-soft modules. So it's like many I don't know, hundreds of different sub modules that, so the sub modules are basically aggregated into a sub module, and then the different sub modules are aggregated into a module, okay? So these are, if we look down in the columns, these are sub modules, but each of them is made up of different sub modules. So each of these boxes has its own methodologies and techniques and factors. Okay, so but IOPA made it relatively easier, because for each sub module and module, we have the same structure. So we have a description, and the description is what's the scope of the module or sub module, and what's the definition of the risk or sub risk. Then we have the input. Input is what we need, right? What we need to do the calculation. Then we have, of course, the output. The output is this sub module or sub module. What is the output that is going to produce? Then we have the calculation process, which is I don't know. It's a set of formulas and so on and so forth. And then some of these modules or sub modules or sub modules have a simplification approach. Okay, so more or less we follow that. Okay, and the underwriting modules are life, health, and non-life. Basically, the universe is that. Okay, so if you're an insurance company, you either have life, health, or non-life as mutually exclusive products. Okay, now, okay, you can argue that you may find a product that has life and non-life elements. Yes, that could be the case. If you go to Asia, for example, they used to, the Asians for whatever reason, put a lot of additional policy benefits, right? So a product has, I don't know, 20, 30 different policy benefits, and some of them could be understood as non-life, some of them as health, and some of them as life.
It's interesting that annuities isn't something different.
Well, annuities is life. It's life. Yeah. That's a good question, right? But also you can have an annuity in non-life, right? Like some form of I don't know, settlement or something like that. Yeah. Now there's I don't know if you follow the news. There's this new medicine, new drug that is the most expensive in the world. That cures. Have you heard of this drug? The price. Well, it cures some form of congenital disease, but you need only one dosage. Only one dosage, and that's it. And then you're cured for life. And so it's a very strange congenital disease. So if a baby is born with this disease, the baby takes just one dosage, and he's healthy again for the rest of his life. All right. So it's a very, very, very strange. The trick here is that this is very expensive, right? Very expensive. So it's the most expensive drug in the world. The price, $2 million. and well, I don't know how something can, how a drug can have this very high price, but I guess the idea is that teams of experts and researchers spent I don't know, a very, very long time coming up with this patent and all the rest. By the way, it's a Swiss drug. And then some insurance companies already have agreed to pay, but they pay the cost of this drug in 5 years, right? So so if you buy this medicine, your policy is going to have a plan to pay out the cost because it's so expensive. So that would be an example of it's very strange, but it would be kind of an annuity in non-life. Right, so this is the overall solvency capital requirement calculation. We are here under the basically under the standard formula world. Okay, so description: the SCR, solvency capital requirement, is the end result of the standard formula calculation. Input: the basic solvency capital requirement, the capital requirement for operational risk, and then adjustment for something that is called the risk absorbing effect of technical provisions and deferred taxes. Why is that? Because remember, I told you yesterday that technical provision is basically reserves. Okay, so this the higher the reserves, the better, or the more chances are that you can that some of the risk can be absorbed. Okay, so you measure that. And the same is true for deferred taxes, because deferred taxes are taxes that you will have to pay in the future, but you have this amount at least to pay now, right? Now the output, this module delivers the overall standard formula capital requirement. So the formula is basically there. It's a sum, right? Basic solvency capital requirement plus adjustments plus the operational risk. Okay, so that's at the top of the. So this is, you do this when you do this sum of 3 components, you are at the end of the road already. You have done hundreds and hundreds of calculations, and then you are at the last piece, at the last part of the Solvency II, solvency capital requirement. Now, basic. Okay, basic. So I go back one. So one of these things, one of these components of the sum is the basic solvency capital requirement. And what is the basic solvency capital requirement? Well, it's composed out of six major risk categories, and they are listed there. So we have solvency capital requirement for market risk, for DEF, they call it default risk, but it's a credit risk. Then we have life, we have NL, which is non-life, we have health, and then we have intangibles. Intangibles is the risk for intangible assets, or intangible asset risk. Okay, so this module delivers the basic solvency capital requirement, and then you see what is that? What is that square root thing? What kind of logic is that, to have the square root of the sum of the combination of all the different? Remember that this allows me to think of a standard deviation type formula, or if you want a variance type formula. Remember that one of the things that we learned in kindergarten is variance of x plus y is variance of x plus variance of y plus 2 times covariance xy. Not kindergarten, well, actual kindergarten, kindergarten for actuaries. Okay, so again, variance of x plus y equals variance of x plus variance of y plus 2 times covariance xy. Okay, so if, but then this is if we have 2 random variables, x and y. How many are going to, how many we have here? Well, instead of having 2, we have 6, right? So we need to take risk 1 with risk 2, risk 1 with risk 3, 1 with 4, etc. 2 with 3, 2 with 4, 2 with 5. And so do all the possible combinations of the 6 risks, and then we have a correlation, right? So we have a correlation coefficient, and this correlation coefficient basically is prescribed through a matrix. Okay, so they tell me, how am I going to glue together these different risks? Well, through linear correlations. Okay, and what's a correlation coefficient? Well, basically the correlation coefficient is basically related to this covariance measure that we have, right? In effect, the correlation coefficient is the covariance divided by the standard deviation, right? So correlation, if I put here correlation coefficient, this rho is equal to the covariance. I'm going to say 2 variables, x, y, divided by the variance of x and the variance of y. Now here, this is the two variable world. Here we have 6 variables. Okay, so we need a matrix, and then this matrix is given by the regulator. Okay, so the regulator gives me this matrix. Why is that? Because this is one of the most difficult things to do in the world. Okay, one is to write a monocycle. I don't know, you know what is a monocycle? Well, I think this is very, very difficult. I tried once because when my children were young, they were learning this monocycle. It's just one wheel. It's like one wheel, right? So this is a monocycle. So they were trying to learn that. Okay, and it's, you know, if you think riding a bicycle is difficult, it's okay for small children. It's difficult to learn to ride a bicycle, but then once you learn, you never forget to ride a bicycle. So you need what's the trick with the bicycle? That you need to go fast, because if you go slow, then you can fall, right? But the monocycle is incredibly difficult. This is very, very difficult. But even more difficult than learning how to ride a monocycle is trying to calculate the dependencies between the risks. Okay, this is a very, very theoretical thing, and the dependencies is how things are going to move together, right? So, or is there, I don't know, if I have more market risk, will other risks be affected? Yes or no? If I have more claims on non-life, will I also have claims in life? Yes or no? So how dependent are these risks? So the regulator is good enough, and he says, okay, here's your matrix, and use the matrix, and then we put this in our Solvency II engine, and we are good. Okay. Now this matrix, of course, which I'm showing now, is has been calibrated. So what's a calibration? Well, basically through these quantitative impact studies, quiz, there were 5 basically in Europe. Germany had 6 quantitative impact studies. So they, and this is, by the way, what many other countries have been doing. Chile is now doing these quiz studies. So what they do is that they invite companies, or they require companies to basically test the formulas and see what kind of results they get, and then they so this is like an industry thing, and then they say, well, I think we can conclude that these are the correlation coefficients. But if you look at something, everything is multiple of 25 here, which is like, that gives you the, I don't know, it's very, very approximate. So what is, and everything has a plus sign. As you know, this number can be as low as -1 and as high as 1. If we have a 1, it's a perfect positive correlation. If we have a -1, it's a perfect negative correlation. Okay, and if we have a 0, is what? Is no correlation. Now, don't confuse no correlation with independence. two variables can be dependent and have correlation 0, okay? Which is, many people don't understand that. If two variables are independent, necessarily the correlation is 0, but not the other way around. If correlation is 0, this doesn't imply that the variables are independent. Could be dependent and have 0 correlation, right? Okay, okay. So these are here basically what, and then you see the diagonal, which is naturally 1. So a risk is perfectly correlated with itself. That's kind of a definition. So here we say that for example, market. If we look at the first column, market is has a 25% correlation coefficient with the rest of the modules. Default, the same thing, or credit, the same thing. Life, perfect correlation with itself by definition, 25% correlation with health, and no correlation with non-life, right? Now, are we assuming here that life and non-life are independent? No, we are assuming that they have no correlation. Okay, still could be dependent. Okay, now what's the criticism with this type of approach? There are many criticisms, and academics like to criticize this approach. I have interesting puzzles that I can show you later that are clear defects of the Solvency II approach, but. One of the things is that when things linear correlations assume that everything along the distributions involved moves the same. So there's the same movement in any part of the distribution. In real life, when things go bad, things tend to be more correlated, right? Risks tend to be more dependent when things go wrong. When things go right, the opposite effect, right? And this can be seen, for example, in financial stress conditions. So if there's a financial crisis, it's like everything moves together. There's a lot of movement, right? If the times are good, there seems to be a relatively low dependency. But here, the correlation coefficient implies that we have linearity. So everything behaves the same with the same force if there are good times or bad times. Okay, so that would be one criticism. So the regulator provides me this matrix. Okay, now. Okay. Now, the non-life underwriting risk. Okay, so this is an example of this is an easy one because it only has 3 submodules, and the submodule called PR. PR is premium and reserve. Then the other one is called lapse. Okay, and lapse is a strange risk. Okay, what is lapse? What would lapse be a risk in a non-life? Well, it may be that through calculation of cash flows, I will receive premium in the future that changes my technical provisions. And if there's the possibility of receiving premium in the future, but there's a risk that this premium will not be received and my technical provisions will be affected, then I have risk. Okay, it is really, you can safely ignore that. I don't think this will be the case here, right? Except that if you have multi-year policies what's a multi-year policy? It's a non-life contract that is that covers 3 years, and typically typically 3 years. Okay, and this is like for very big policies. I can tell you, I I know, for example, the Mexican oil company Pemex has this the 3-year policy, multi-year, and covers a lot of risks, And this policy is so big, and so big is probably half a billion dollars in premium. So you can imagine how big it is. And what they do is that this is a single policy, right? And this policy impacts the market statistics because it's $500 million in premium, okay? And Mexico produces what? About 25 billion. So that's what is it? That's about 5% of the total production is just one policy, right? And what they do is that they basically publish in the internet the coverage that is required and all the rest, and then companies submit proposals. It's about a bidding process, okay? So there could be this type of lapse risk in these multi-year policies. But for practical purposes, it's very technical. Now, what's perhaps more relevant, and we're going to see an example of that, how the mathematics work, is the capital requirement for non-life catastrophe risk. Okay, and then we see another square root approach. Okay, which comes from the notion of variance or standard deviation, and then we have a matrix, right? Because we have to glue together the 3 risks. Okay, so here let me show you the correlation. So we have in this case 3 times 3. Okay, for the premium reserve, lapse, and CAT. Okay. Now, this is the premium and reserve. So I go back. So this is the first one. It's a submodule. This is the premium reserve submodule. So description, combination of the 2 main sources of non-life underwriting risk. That is premium risk and reserve risk. What is premium risk? Well, I charged the premium, but the premium was insufficient, right? That's premium risk. What's reserve risk? Well, my reserve is insufficient. So the risk that the premium is insufficient, or the reserve is insufficient, that the premium and reserve risk. Okay. Now, if there's a subtle difference between reserves in life and non-life. Okay. In life, we basically have basically, we can deal with the cash flows and basically say that the reserve is going to be the present value of benefits minus the present value of future premiums. Okay, so that's a reserve. And then we have ways, we have formulas or cash flows to calculate this type of reserves. Because normally the premium that we're getting is a level premium, but the cost is increasing. Why the cost is increasing? Because mortality increases. But with age. So we are in a way overcharging at the beginning of the contract, and then we are undercharging at the end of the contract. So we build a reserve naturally. Now, what's a reserve in non-life? Well, a reserve in non-life is established when a claim is received. So when a claim is received, we open a claim file, okay, and then we. Well, there are different processes. There's the adjustment of the claim or the settlement of the claim, and depending on the nature of the claim, if it is a property damage, we need to send experts to evaluate the damage to the property and to determine what's the claim to be paid, and so on and so forth. So. If it is a big claim, it can take years to settle. So what we do is that we open a file and then we start making payments, and then we need to calculate the IBNR, right? Incurred but not reported, and things like that of our policies. So it's a different story. And then theoretically, a non-life claim can live forever because we can get for some long-tail business, for example, liability. You have heard of this asbestosis problem in the United States and many other countries that people were exposed to working with asbestos, and asbestos causes cancer, and many people are claiming now for having been exposed 20 years ago or something like that. Now they say that that one risk in the future is the risk of particularly for young people using headphones all the time, very loud. That in the future, when these young people reach maturity ages, they will have problems with hearing because of this damage that is hearing loud music every day, for many years. So that potentially that could be there could be a liability for manufacturers of headphones or whatever. No? So that's why if you read the instructions to your iPhone, there's like 1,000 pages of disclaimer information. Nobody reads that. You accept the terms and that's it. But they tell you that they are not they are not liable if you hear the music too loud, right? And even I have iPhone. I don't know with Samsung or other phones, but in the iPhone, when you are turning up the volume, there's a line that starts turning yellow and then red to signal that you are hearing the music very loud. But they say that this could be something that we need to take we need to pay attention to the liability, right? Okay, so we need we need lots of inputs. So. And bear in mind that this is a simplification. When we do exercises later on, I will show you more theory. But this is kind of a simplified approach. So I need all these things. I need the best estimate for claims outstanding for each segment. Now, what is a segment? Segment is the way in which Solvency II divides the non-life world. So I can have only 12 products, okay? Or I need to classify the products into 12 boxes only. And we are going to see what those boxes are, okay? So best estimate for claims outstanding. So claims outstanding are the claims that have already been received, okay? So these are the claims outstanding. Now, PS is the estimate of premium of the segment S during the following 12 months. How much premium am I going to expect per segment? Okay, per segment. Then I need also the premiums earned over the last 12 months. Then I need the expected present value of earned premiums of segment after the following 12 months. Okay, after the following 12 months. And then I need the expected present value of earned premiums of the segment S, where initial recognition is within 12 months, but excluding premiums to be earned during the 12 months after recognition. I have to read that 20 times to understand it, but the idea here is that not all contracts start on valuation date. And by the way, one other difference in Solvency II and IFRS 17 is that Solvency II, we measure everything on January the 1st. So we measure everything for the upcoming year. This is Solvency II. IFRS 17 is that we measure everything at the end of the year, okay? Or at the end of your fiscal year. What's the typical fiscal year here? January to December? Yeah. But in some countries, for example, in Japan, fiscal year is April until March. Yeah. And I also know companies where we have a client where they start in July the 1st until June 30th. But in many places in the world is January to December, okay? So assuming that January to December is the reporting period, you do the IFRS 17 at the end of the year. But solvency you do at the beginning of the year for the upcoming year. So that's a difference. Of course, this is relative because you are going to be doing Solvency II every day, and you're going to be doing IFRS 17 every day, because if you wait until 31st of December, Sylvester, to start working, well, it's not going to, you're not going to get very far, particularly for IFRS 17. But same is true for Solvency II. So if you're a solvency actuary, you have a lot of work to do every day, right? It's not like of course, there will be even more work towards the beginning of the year, right? And in Switzerland, I tell you, the regulator has deadline of April 30th to deliver your solvency report, okay? And your for the solvency report for that particular year. So this year, 2019, valuation date is January the 1st, always, and deadline to file the SST, the Swiss Solvency Test, April 30th. Okay, so with all these inputs, we basically calculate the premium risk, okay? Or rather, the premium and reserve risk with all these inputs. So that's all I need. And here, well, basically, somebody's going to say, well, what about claims experience and things like that? Well, the claims experience is, well, the premiums are proxies for claims experience, right? Because here the only part where I see claims is in the first item, okay? The first input item, best estimates for claims outstanding, but then the rest is based on premium. Now here, theoretically, we are saying that the premiums is a good proxy for the value of the claims, right? And look at this formula. This formula is we have later the derivation of this formula, but I can tell you right away that this comes out of assuming that the premium and reserve risk together behaves log normally, right? So there's the log normal distribution that is an underlying assumption. If you want to read about the theoretical justification for using the log normal distribution, IOPA makes that available, or let me know and I'll send you the document. And this first formula here is what we have in the quiz 5. They came up with this formula, and then at the end they decided that all this thing is about 3 times the standard. It's 2.6 times the standard deviation of the risk on the log normal, and then they say, let's do 3.
Is this mandatory or a suggestion?
This is the standard. This is the either you do this or you do your own.
Or you can do your own thing. Okay.
You can do your own thing. So the standard formula is if you don't want to do mathematics, just follow this, and that's it. Yeah. And this is very easy because now, okay, I give you this horrible formula, but then in your system you put only 3 times sigma times V. Now V is not easy to calculate, but it's arithmetic. There's no nothing, it's only 3 times the sigma times V. Now the sigma, I don't know, I need like 5 pages of formulas to calculate the sigma, and then another 3-4 pages to calculate the V. But everything is prescribed. They give me everything, okay, which I will show to you later on. No? Okay, so sigma is the standard deviation for the premium reserve risk considering all segments, and V is a volume measure. V stands for volume. Volume measure determined the input premiums and claims for all segments. A correlation matrix between segments and standard deviations per segment, gross and net of reinsurance, is prescribed. And good news for reinsurers. Basically, there's a better recognition of reinsurance benefits under Solvency II. Okay, and this is this could mean, or this has meant also good business opportunities for reinsurers. Okay, now we are going to see the implementation of this formula later. Also some numbers to make life easier. Okay, right. So these are quantitative risk models. Okay, so here I'm saying that there's three types or three approaches. Okay, and this is again, you can argue there's no universal way of classify the different approaches, but I say we have, of course, a notional amount. Okay, so notional amount is your risk margin or your solvency capital requirement is a factor of something, right? Like yesterday, I told you about the Basel Accords, that the original idea was if a bank receives 100, the bank can lend up to 92 cents, right? So you have an 8% factor there, right? So if I multiply certain factors by notional amounts, then I can have an idea of a solvency capital requirement. Under so-called Solvency I, we have this 18% of premiums of claims up to certain amount, plus 16% above that amount for non-life, and then for life we have this. What is it? 3% of reserve plus 4% of reserves plus 3 per thousand of net amount at risk. Okay, so these are factor-based approaches. Okay, which are still used. The banks use a lot of these approaches, and then the standard formula uses a lot of these approaches. So I can very well say that in the past the solvency was a function of the premium. Okay, and then premiums and claims are of course very connected. Okay, so we can be practical and say, well, let's have a. Remember, the first day I had a 75 risk adjustment factor, and this 75, I say, well, it is simply 10% of the outflows. The outflows were 750, so I say 10%. So this is kind of a notional approach. Use percentages, and with these percentages, you determine a solvency measure or a risk measure. So it's a advantage is that it's very simple, but disadvantages, no distinction between short and long-term positions. Okay, also no account for diversification effects, and what else we have? Well, the notional amounts may not necessarily represent economic values. So that's one set of disadvantages of this notional approach. But the world is very happy with notional approaches because I multiply one factor by a volume measure, and then I get the result. So it's relatively easy, intuitive, okay, and still used by the banking system extensively, and also by some of the soft modules of Solvency II. Okay, so it's there to stay, I would say. Okay, so that's the first approach. Second approach is like the mathematics, right? The mathematics, and then with the mathematics, basically I calculate loss distributions. So what are loss distributions? This is the distribution of the claims, right? Claims or losses is the same word, right? Claims or losses. They call it loss distributions, or many authors do. And this is when I say distribution, I'm talking about a probability distribution. Okay, probability distribution. So I see how many claims I'm going to get, and what's the size of the claims, and I construct the so-called aggregate distribution. So, for example, for the number of claims, I used a so-called discrete distribution function. For example, Poisson, or negative binomial. These are examples of, this is probability 101, taught also in actuarial kindergarten. Poisson, negative binomial. Now for the size of the claim, I use something called continuous distribution, right? For example, I said log normal before. What else? Gamma, exponential, things, this type of distributions. So what's a distribution? I think, we said that before, that it's basically a function of a random variable representing some phenomenon, okay? So I can have a phenomenon which is the number of claims that I expect to receive per unit of time, or I can have also the size of the claims, right? Now, in life, basically, we work with mortality tables. And what are these mortality tables? Well, these are like expected probabilities or expected values. So if I have a rate of 3 per mil, 3 per thousand, right? So that's QX equals 0.003. Okay, and what's the meaning of that? That there's out of observation, I will have probability of dying of 3 divided by 1,000, right? 0.003 probability of dying between ages x and x plus 1. That's a QX. So actuaries have spent a lot of time with these mortality tables, and these mortality tables are theoretically derived out of experience, okay, out of observation, right? And there's the concept of the mortality table, but this is kind of an expected number, right? If I want to link that to probability theory, okay, I have there's a lot of theory, because at the end, basically, I'm taking a tabular approach, right, as opposed to a theoretical or continuous approach, because the world behaves discretely, right? But I can say that for the mathematics, the mathematics of the continuous case is far easier to deal with. But except the implementation part, right? Because in the implementation part, I will have to discretize everything. So I measure everything by periods. But this will be clear later on when we do examples. Okay? So modern risk measures are characteristics of the underlying distribution. So a characteristic of a distribution, expected value is a characteristic. Standard deviation is a characteristic. Skewness is a characteristic. Variance is a characteristic. But also we learned yesterday value at risk and tail value at risk. These are characteristics of the distribution. Okay. Now there are some distributions that do not have a variance, right? So variance is infinite, right? You have heard of these distributions. For example, Pareto distribution, and be careful, there are many types of Pareto distributions, but these distributions are so long-tailed that the variance does not exist, right? Or this type, I'll talk about these distributions later on. Now, what I like about this is that, again, once I understand the concept of distribution, which again is like mathematics or IFRS 17 or Solvency II, you enter a room that is dark and you don't see anything, okay? You're lost. And you find the switch, and then you turn the lights, and then you see everything. This is like that. Mathematics is like that. And IFRS 17 is also like that. You know, you are lost, but suddenly the light is turned on, and then you see everything. That's the way it is. Now, don't expect to understand everything just in one reading. There's a little bit of assimilation that you need to do, but this is very beautiful because it's very appealing. Okay, you can also calculate diversification effects, which is basically the benefits that you get from the distribution or the probability approach. Why? Because you see that remember I mentioned before, if you have variance of x plus y, this is equal to what? Variance of x plus variance of y plus 2 times covariance of x plus y, x and y, sorry. And this is what? Basically, this is how the two variables move together. But if the variables are independent, this thing goes away, right? So basically, this is a measure of correlation, right? And if you take, if you start to play with square roots, you see that you will find diversification effects or diversification benefits, which is a very good feature, and we are going to calculate those later, okay? Now, disadvantages of this type of approaches, okay? Disadvantages. And by the way, yesterday we calculated the value at risk and the t-value at risk remember we had an example with 10,000 policies, and we used the central limit theorem. We calculated that. Not difficult. We are going to see more of that today. Now, disadvantages. Estimates of loss distributions are based necessarily on historical data. Everything, all models are based on history. So the idea is that I'm forecasting the future based on what has happened. This is the way we work, right? There's no other way around it. Now, many people say, well, the future does not necessarily equal the past. Yeah, that's a good point. But we don't have a crystal ball. But don't tell that to the rest of the company, because people think that we have a crystal ball. So let them believe that we have a crystal ball. But anyway, we are going to estimate everything from what we have seen before. Now, what's a good definition of a model? Think of a regression line, right? So you have this type of formulation, right? Which is this is a linear equation, and what you do is that you basically apply this to some observations of the two. You want to predict you want to predict y based on x, right? And then you calculate the parameters here, alpha and beta, right? So what you are doing, even in a regression problem, is that you take observations and then you predict behavior. So everything is about predicting behavior, and with the distributions you predict claims behavior, and then you measure how distant is the expected behavior to the worst case behavior, right? So that's what you do. Then there's some difficulties estimating distributions because everything is forecasting, and forecasting is based on data. Nowadays we have better machines, better technology, better everything, and companies are now dealing with the so-called big data, and everybody seems to be very interested in big data, and companies capture a lot the information all the time, and insurance companies sooner or later are also going to be there. I don't think many insurance companies are there at this time, like other industries. But think of all the all the innovations that you have. I tell you, for example, in Switzerland, there's a company selling health insurance, If you use one of these Fitbits, Fitbit or fitness tracker that measures how many steps you do in a period of time, right, in a day or something. Now this company has an app, and the app is connected to your Fitbit. Okay, so if you walk more than 10,000 steps per day, you receive a discount, a premium discount. So they are monitoring your behavior, right? Now I saw that in China somebody invented a device. You put your Fitbit there, and this thing moves, and it collects steps. You don't have to move. You just put your Fitbit there, and then this is because also China is very advanced in this type of things, and then this is linked to the insurance company. So this is fraud, right? So we are very creative when it comes to defrauding insurance companies. But anyway, this is big data, and it would be, in the future, it would be better to pay for insurance as on a utilization basis. Right now, if I have a car and I park the car in the garage all the month and I didn't use the car, I'm going to pay exactly the same premium as the person who drives the car 10 hours per day, 7 days a week. So the premium is the same, and I didn't use the car the full month. The car was parked in the garage. So the idea is that in the future, it would be better to pay car insurance, for example, based on utilization, right? So if I use the car 27 minutes a day, I pay premium for 27 minutes. That would be, and technology is there, right? Technology is there. Is that only companies find it way too difficult, and they are distracted by implementing IFRS 17 and other things, that innovation is a bit slow, and of course there's more technicalities to it. But then this would be the approach, everything based on data, and just one other thing: dependencies is a big topic. Dependencies is how risks move together. So. Number one, notional approach. Number two, measures based on loss distributions. And number three, something that is, perhaps you have heard this word, is very common in the banking industry and also in the insurance industry. And these are stress tests, right? Stress tests or scenario tests. So basically what I do is that I consider certain scenarios. For example, what if scenarios. What if there's a stock market crash of 25%? What would happen to my company, right? So what I do is that in the computer I simulate these shocks, called shocks, in the price here in this example, 25% drop in the stock market. So if there is such a shock, what happens to my company? Or I can also simulate, well, if mortality is 25% larger than expected, what happens? This is very simple to do. This very simple exercise, because I have already my projection systems and my cash flows and everything. So I can simply use whatever factors, create the scenarios, and that's it. So here I have a vector called vector X, and this is a collection of risk factor changes, okay? And also I have another vector W, from W1 to Wn, and these are weight factors, okay? So the risk is expressed as the maximum of the multiplication of the W, of the weight, times the loss of the portfolio if scenario X occurs. Okay, so this is quite easy to do, very, very comfortable doing it in Excel or in another programming language. Quite easy, very easy to understand. And this is regulators use this type of testing all the time in Europe, banks, insurance companies, etc. Okay, and this could be a good complement for risk measures based on distributions. And one disadvantage is to determine scenarios and weights. And for example, the Swiss regulator tells you, well, you have to calculate risk using this, and that. And but there are certain risks that are very difficult to capture. So you do that through scenarios. For example, the risk of a cyber attack. That's very difficult to estimate what is the risk, because you have very little observation, very little experience, and also it's a risk that is very dynamic, changes all the time. So how much capital should I allocate to face a cyber risk attack? This is impossible to calculate. So what they do is that they say, well, assume that you are going to be hit by a cyber risk attack with a probability 0.1%. And if that happens, you will lose 10 million, for example. So as easy as that. So this is very easy calculation, but is better than nothing. So what they do is that they prescribe certain scenarios. I can show you some of these scenarios, and basically everything is based on notional amounts. Other types of scenarios, what happens, for example, if there's I don't know, if the trade wars between China and the United States continue, what is the impact to the economy, and things like that are very next to impossible to calculate. You cannot put mathematics into that. So mathematics is of course very powerful, but the models are limited to the type of data that we can collect, right? And the models have also many underlying assumptions. Some assumptions are reasonable, some other assumptions are not that reasonable. So okay, so we have seen that there's mainly three types of approaches: notional amount, factors multiplying notional amounts, risk measures, okay, the mathematics of distributions and probability and statistics, and number three, scenario risk measures, okay, or stress tests. Some people call them stress tests. Okay, so any questions here? I'm going to stop now before starting with certain characteristics of the functions, and let's see if we have our coffee break now, and then we come back at 11.